So it all started when I was a young kid. My parents were always in church, and I grew up, knowing about God at an early age in my life. And it was really wonderful to be surrounded with people that showed you love. Some things clicked in my head, but not everything made complete sense. By the time I was in my teenage years, I had slowly fallen away from my faith and had decided to kind of look out what this whole world was about that everybody said was so terrible and so bad. And that's when I began to engage in different friendships and relationships that slowly, began to take away from my freedom in Christ. When I was 18 years old, I worked a full-time job at a telemarketer company. And this company was a really great place to work when you're a young person. But it's really one of those places where you have to be really careful of who your friends are. And I remember my mom saying before I started working there, you should be careful. Those people don't share the faith that you share. And, growing up in church, that was just like the same speech that I had always heard. So I wanted to prove it for myself that these people weren't really that bad. And I began to make friends there and started going out. They started inviting me to different parties, and I began to consume drugs and alcohol on a regular basis. Not feeling enough, not feeling like I belonged anywhere, not feeling like my life had any purpose. And I remember one day my mom came up to me and she said, well, you had a lot of dreams for this time of your life, and you had a lot of expectations of what life was going to look like. And I remember I just curled up in bed and said, if I could choose to die today, I would do it. And tears just came in her eyes, and it was really a difficult time in my life. I was just so anxious with how I didn't feel like I was going to accomplish anything important in life or be anybody. And I always remembered people as I grew up, coming to me saying God had a plan for my life and He had a purpose. But I guess a lot of the times those words, you hear them so much that they just don't mean anything anymore. And that's what had happened to me when I was 18 years old. And as time went by, I just found myself in this hole of complete depression and anxiety. I just decided, my life isn't worth it anymore. I'm just going to take it away. So my parents were gone. My mom was on a trip here in the United States, and my dad was out of town with my sisters, and I was all alone at home. And I had prepped everything that I needed to inject myself with enough air to be able to make my heart stop. And I was laying in my bed, and I had the needle already in my arm. And that's just when I felt God in a way that I cannot explain it to anybody physically that I've ever come in contact with. It was just this overwhelming sense of love and acceptance, and this reassurance that everything was going to be okay if I just laid my life down to Him and just gave Him my concerns and the things that I was living through. And it was just me by myself at home, and I had that needle already stuck in my vein, and I just pulled it out and I knelt and I said, God, if this is truly You, if You're truly real, You have to do something. You have to change my life completely. And I gave Him a deadline. I said, do it by the 1st of next year. And this was in October of 2011. During this time, my mother was in a trip in the United States, and she actually met my wife, and she prayed for me during this entire trip. And so I know that her prayers were being answered, even though I was in a position of so much depression, that her prayers were being answered from far away for God to come and meet me at my specific point in life. And I am just so thankful that she did that, because out of that, I have found purpose. It was not long after, in the month of December of that year, that a group of short-term missionaries came to our church, and they looked at me and they offered me this opportunity to serve in Uruguay alongside who is now my wife and my parents-in-law. And I remember that I told them, I don't have the resources to go. And they said, well, we'll pay your way, or at least your stay there, but you will have to pay for your own plane ticket. And I said, well, I can't even do that. I can't afford that. But that's when faith came. And by faith, I decided to quit my job that same day. It was a Sunday. The very next day, I quit my job, and my boss offered me more money. And I said, no, I quit. I'm moving. I didn't have a plane ticket. And a few days later, I received a phone call from an uncle in the United States who works at an airplane company. And he said, I've got a ticket for you. The only issue that I have is the date. And he said, it's the 1st of January of 2012. And that's when I knew that God was truly real and that He met me at my lowest point. And this is where my decision to follow Him completely became what my life is today. It's been 8 years since that. And my wife and I have served in Uruguay for that time. We are full-time missionaries there. And we're just so excited to see what God can do in people's lives when we just decide to allow Him to do what He wants, and we just pick up where we're at and follow Him. My name is Carlos, and this is my story of why I follow Jesus.